In this video, we are going to have a look at the Pergear 25mm f1.8 lens. Let's find out whether this really affordable lens is a good value for money lens or is a lens that you should completely avoid. Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard Wong here, welcome back to the channel. Recently, the guys from Pergear contacted me and they told me that they have a new 25mm f1.8 lens and asked me if I'm interested in doing a review of this lens. So this lens is available for both the APS-C and also micro four thirds mirrorless cameras, and this one I have here is a sample for the micro four thirds cameras. Now, they sent me this sample, but as usual, this review is going to be an honest review, so I'm going to share with you what I like and don't like about this lens. This is quite a small lens and it is mostly made of metal. Feels very solid and very well made. One thing I want to mention first is the price of this lens is very affordable. I think right now when I'm doing this review, the price of this lens is around $60-ish US dollar on their website. So this is probably one of the cheapest lens that you can buy for the micro four thirds cameras. But having said that, the build quality is actually very good. As I just mentioned, this is pretty much all made of metal. Feels very solid. The focus ring at the front is very smooth, very well dampened. The travel for the focus ring is about 90 degrees. The amount of travel is just about right for this f1.8 lens. And then at the back we have the aperture ring here, which is from f1.8, which is the maximum aperture, all the way to f16, which is the minimum aperture. This is a decrypted aperture ring. If you have watched my previous review, you know that I'm not really a big fan of decrypted aperture ring because I'm more a photographer, so I definitely wish it has clicks on it, or even better, they have the switchable design that can change from click to no click. But maybe I'm asking too much for a lens that only costs around $60 US. When you change focus, the front element would move a little bit, and the front filter thread is 43mm. This is a completely mechanical and you can call it a dumb lens, full manual focus, and if you look at the back of the lens, there is also no electronic contacts at all. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the build quality of this lens. It feels very solid and definitely better than what I would expect for a lens that only costs around $60 US. Next, let's have a look at the image quality. I do really want to see how good or how bad the image quality from this Pergear 25mm f1.8 lens is. So I want to do some image comparison with another similar lens. The closest lens that I could do a comparison is probably the Panasonic 25mm f1.7 lens, because they are both 25mm and they have a very similar maximum aperture. Unfortunately, right now here in New Zealand, we are having a 4-week nationwide lockdown because of the COVID-19 virus. So I cannot really go and try borrow a 25mm 1.7 lens to do the comparison. But I do have the Panasonic Leica 25mm f1.4 lens myself, so I'm going to do some comparison between these two lenses. Now, this Panasonic Leica 25mm f1.4 lens is the first version, it's not the latest second version, but as far as I know, the first and second version, the optical formula is identical, so the image quality should be identical. The only difference is that the second version has better weather resistance, so that means the image quality from this lens would be identical to the Mark II version. The first thing I noticed when I start shooting with this Pergear lens is I noticed the color seems to be less saturated, and also the contrast also seems to be a little bit lower as well compared to other lenses. If you look at this comparison photo, the photo from the Pergear does have a little bit lower contrast and also saturation. So maybe pay attention to other comparison photo in this review and see whether you notice the same difference in terms of color saturation and contrast or not. And because of that, I feel like the picture I capture using the Pergear lens quite often would give me a look that is similar to what the more vintage lens would usually give me. Okay, let's look at the image sharpness and look at the center sharpness first. With the Pergear lens at the maximum aperture f1.8, the center sharpness is already very good. If you zoom in even to 200%, you can see that the sharpness is already very good. If you compare it to the result from the Leica lens at the same aperture, the Leica lens, the center sharpness doesn't seem to be quite as good, and there's also a bit of glow effect from the Leica lens where the Pergear lens doesn't have. If you stop down to f2.8, then the Pergear lens center sharpness become excellent. Even all those fine details and texture on the brick wall is perfectly captured by the Pergear lens. If you look at the corner, at the maximum aperture f1.8, the corner is slightly soft if you compare it to the center, but it is still very usable. Stop down to f2.8, then the corner sharpness would improve quite a lot, but the maximum sharpness seems to be around f5.6. Compared to the photo captured by the Leica lens, I would say at the same aperture, the two lens corner sharpness seems to be very similar. The Leica lens may be slightly sharper than the Pergear lens, but the difference is really tiny. In terms of the distortion, the Pergear has very minimal amount of distortion. If you look at this brick wall photo, the Leica lens also has very minimal amount of distortion. Put the sample photos from these two lenses side by side, you can see that both of these lenses has very minimal amount of distortion. When I was looking at these two brick wall photos, which were captured at the exactly identical spot, I noticed one thing is the field of view from these two lenses are slightly different. The Leica lens seems to capture a slightly wider field of view compared to the Pergear lens. Now, this may be due to the focus briefing issue, which I will talk about a little bit later in this review. At the maximum aperture f1.8, there is only a small amount of vignetting that is noticeable in the photo capture using the Pergear lens. If you stop down to f2.8, then vignetting is virtually not noticeable. This is very similar to the sample photo that was captured using the Leica lens at the same aperture. When shooting at the maximum aperture, I can definitely see some chromatic aberration around the high contrast area in the sample photo that I captured using the Pergear lens. But overall, I think the amount of chromatic aberration is not too bad, because if you look at this comparison photo that I shot using the Leica lens at the same aperture f1.8, the Leica lens actually has more noticeable chromatic aberration than the Pergear lens. Because this Pergear 25mm is quite a fast lens, so I thought maybe it's good to also test if it could be a good lens for astrophotography or not. This is a photo I shot earlier this week on a clear night at the maximum aperture f1.8, and when I checked the result, I was actually a bit surprised, because even when I zoom in and check the photo at 200% zoom, I find that the amount of chroma is actually a lot less than what I expected. So if you are looking at getting a cheap lens to try do a bit of astrophotography, this Pergear 25 f1.8 lens could be a good choice. Just be careful if you do want to do that. Don't just turn the focus ring all the way to the infinity end, because if you do that, the focus is actually beyond infinity. So what you need to do is that you should zoom in the viewfinder or the screen when you are trying to focus, and just move it slowly and just carefully until you get the maximum sharpness of the stars in the screen. The Pergear lens has 12 round aperture braid, and probably because of that, the bokeh from this lens, especially when shooting at the maximum aperture, is very round and very smooth. And I also don't see any onion ring pattern in the bokeh ball, and the bokeh just dissolves very beautifully into the background. Even when I stop down the lens to f2.8 or f4, the bokeh is still relatively round and smooth. And if you look at it side by side comparison with the Leica lens that shoot at the same aperture, you would find that the Pergear lens actually gives you more rounded and more smooth bokeh. Everything seems very good with the Pergear lens so far, but if the lens has one biggest weakness, it would be the lens flare. When shooting photo on a bright sunny day with the sun is directly in front of the camera, quite often I would get quite a bit of lens flare, and especially when I'm trying to shoot portrait with the sun or a strong light source that is directly in front of the camera. In the extreme case when the lens flare becomes very bad, the contrast of the photo becomes so low that the photo becomes totally unusable. You just have to be really careful when shooting backlit photo. The good thing with mirrorless camera is you can preview the image through the electronic viewfinder or the LCD screens. That means if the lens flare become really bad and affect your photo, you should be able to see and notice it immediately, so that you can probably adjust your camera angle a little bit or do something to reduce the amount of lens flare. There is a bit of focus briefing with this Pergear lens, but overall I don't think it is too terrible. If you look at this side-by-side comparison, I changed the focus from around 1 meter to infinity. There is a bit of focus briefing with the Pergear lens, but in comparison, the Leica lens does have a lot more noticeable focus briefing. One interesting thing I noticed when checking this focus briefing test footage is when the focus is set at around 1 meter, the field of view of these two lenses are pretty much identical. But when I change the focus to infinity, because the Leica lens has a lot more focus briefing, so you'll see that the field of view will change a lot more, and the field of view become a lot wider than the Pergear lens at the infinity focus setting. For only around $60, this Pergear 25mm f1.8 is surprisingly good value for money. The build quality is very good, it feels very solid, made of metal. Both the aperture ring and the focus ring are very smooth. Image quality wise, I think lens flare resistance or lack of lens flare resistance is definitely the biggest weakness of this lens. So if you are shooting photo or video when there's a bright light source in front of the camera, you definitely have to be really careful if you want to avoid lens flare or ghosting in your photo or video. But apart from that, everything seems to be very good. Even when I compare it with the Leica 25mm lens, pretty much in every single area, the Pergear lens performs as good, if not slightly better than the Leica lens at the same aperture setting, which is very impressive. To be fair, this Leica lens is not the best Leica lens for the micro four thirds camera, because this is the first Leica lens for the micro four thirds cameras. But having said that, this is still a much more expensive lens than the Pergear lens. I think this price is around 10 times more expensive than the Pergear lens. So if you look at it that way, then the Pergear can easily match the image quality of the Leica lens. Apart from the lens flare, this is definitely very impressive. Now, of course, this Pergear lens is a manual focus only lens, and there's no electronic context. So manual focus is not for everyone, and certainly not for every single kind of photography. If you need to shoot some fast action, then this lens is probably not good for you. But if you just want to have a lens to capture some landscape or something that doesn't move too fast, or even astrophotography, then this could be quite a good choice for you, especially if you have never tried manual focus before and want to give it a try. For example, if you only have the kit lens for your micro four thirds camera at the moment and you are looking at something that has a faster aperture, for example, you want to do some portrait, or if you want to have better low light performance, then this Pergear is quite a good choice for you because it is very affordable, and manual focus using a mirrorless camera is actually very easy if you have never tried it before. And because the price is only $60 or so, which is cheaper than some of the filter in the market. So if you buy it and you don't really like it, I think it is really not too bad financial wise. And also because the lens is so small, you can easily fit it into your camera bag or even just your pocket. So you could easily just carry it with you all the time without increasing the size or weight of your camera bag too much. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any question about this Pergear lens, feel free to just drop a comment below. Thanks again for watching this video, and I will see you in my next video.